Hey everyone, this is Chris here, and today is October 23rd, 2022, and in this video, we're going to be discussing whether or not Jimmy Connors had the potential of winning the French Open back in 1974, and whether he could have potentially won the calendar year Grand Slam that year if he had been allowed to play the event. Now, before we get into this topic, I'd like to encourage you guys, if you're new to this channel, to please take a minute to hit the subscribe button down below. That'll keep you notified of any time we release additional content like this. And of course, if you enjoy videos like this, then please be sure to share this video with your friends. All right, guys, without further ado, let's get into it. So when it comes to the topic that we're going to be discussing in today's video, it's really important to understand that the 1970s were a very different time in the men's game. And I'm not just talking about the fact that they played with wood rackets back then. And there were rules back then that would prohibit players from being able to play certain events depending on if they chose to play world team tennis. You see, back in the 1970s, the ATP didn't have a monopoly on all the events like they have today. So you'd have World Team Tennis, of course you'd have the ATP, you've got the ITF, you've got a whole bunch of these different branches and these different organizations essentially for tennis that existed back then that don't exist today, and they didn't work together very well. So in 1974, Jimmy Connors would have a really great start to the year by winning the Australian Open. He would defeat Phil Dent in that final in 4 sets. And then before the start of the French Open, they decided that Jimmy Connors would be ineligible to play that event because he had committed to playing world team tennis. And unfortunately for Connors, he was never given that chance to really go for the Grand Slam because the French Federation would not allow him to play in that event. So flash forward a few years now, and we're going to go ahead and go to 1979. This would be Connors' first time playing at the French Open, and Jimmy Connors was already 26 years old by 1979. So he really missed a lot of his prime years where he could have potentially won the French Open. And I did a video on a career comparison video last year on Connors and Agassi and Lendl. And one thing that I neglected to mention about Connors was that he was not allowed to play at the French Open for certain years. So theoretically, he could have won more than 8 Grand Slams. And there is a good reason to consider him as being the best of those 3 players beyond the reasons that I brought up in that video. And then you also have to factor in who won the French Open in 1974. Well, that was Bjorn Borg. And Borg, of course, was one of the toughest players to beat on clay coming out of the 1970s. Borg would only lose at the French Open on 2 occasions, and they were both to Adriano Panetta, who was a big, powerful serve and volley type player who could basically hit Borg off the court or power through him, if you will. And Connors didn't really have that playing style. He was more of a counterpuncher. So in my opinion, I really don't see Connors having a lot of success with trying to grind down a young Borg. I'm not saying that he couldn't have done it, and he was definitely in good enough form in that year to potentially do that. But if I had to go in one direction or the other, I would definitely lean more in favor of Borg winning the French Open and preventing Connors from achieving the calendar year Grand Slam. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you think that Jimmy Connors would have won the French Open that year if he'd been allowed to play it, and would have completed the calendar year Grand Slam because of it? Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you at the next one.